I almost bounced out after the first vignette. I came so close to it because I was like, it was too real and it hurt too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Annyeonghaseyo! Welcome to Afternoona Delight, where Leah, Megan, and Amy, romance novelists and your K-romance guides. So grab some tteokbokki and listen to your new favorite unnies.
Hey everyone, it is Leah here, and I am without Megan and Amy, but don't be too sad because I have one of my very favorite special guests who now is a podcast host in their own right. And would you like to introduce yourself again?
Hi, everyone. My name's Sarah. I post on Instagram and Twitter as at Cambridge Drama This, and we just launched our first episode of Afternoona Asks last week, which I co-host with Grace, who's also another friend of the pod, and I'm so happy to be back for another deep dive.
Yeah, so today we are doing strictly a deep dive on a drama, and this is a drama that Amy and Megan haven't watched, and I can't say I judge them, I just feel bad for them because this isn't, we're in the non-spoiler section, but as a spoiler, this I feel like is an excellent drama. So Sarah and I watched it. We both agreed it was very worthy to be discussed. And we want to put it on everyone's radar because I think it wasn't that it completely flew under the radar, but I don't think it's gotten the love and appreciation that it really deserves. So we are going to take a stab today at making the case for why you should watch Our Blues. So yes. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about Our Blues?
So Our Blues came out in 2022, and actually it got a lot of hype before it got launched, right? Because it has an amazing cast, notably for the return of Kim Woo-bin, who has, he was missing from the small screen after quite a long hiatus, and he's joined by his in real life girlfriend Shimina, as well as Mr. Sunshine himself, Lee Byung-hun, and also other actors like Han Ji-min, who you might know from One Spring Night, Hi Jekyll Me, and also one of my favorite was certainly, I think, everyone's favorite, but definitely mine, Oma, playing a non-Oma role, Lee Jung-un, who was Dongbek's mum in Camellia, as well as plenty of other people's mums, and she was also in Strangers from Hell.
Yeah, where she's cannibal.
There, yes. So she's very versatile. Yeah. Anyway, so briefly, because this is an omnibus drama, the synopsis from my drama list, I'm just going to kind of run through briefly. It tells the story of many diverse characters that are somehow interconnected in one way or the other. And it's all set on the incredibly beautiful island of Jeju. So we have different characters playing different roles. We've got Lee Dong-suk, played by Lee Dong-hun, who sells goods from his van for a living. And he meets Min Suna, who is played by Shimina, a girl with a mysterious past who has come to Jeju to escape that life. We also have Kim Won-bin playing Park Jung-jun, a ship captain who falls in love with Lee Yong-uk, played by Han Jin-min, who is a haenyo diver with a bright and bubbly personality. And there are various other characters as well that we meet all along the drama. The drama has kind of, like I said, different stories, and they kind of interweave with each other, I think, really, really well. But we also get a kind of focus part of the drama that's really about their stories.
Yes. So, okay. First question is, what got you started on this drama, and did it meet your expectations?
So yeah, so did you watch it live airing? Did you watch it when it was dropping there, or did you shortly after?
I think I started it as it was wrapping. So it was live, but I think by the time I got to the end, I wasn't waiting on episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, like I said, it got a lot of hype because it was, Kim Woo-bin had been away from the screen for about 6 years, during which he'd been diagnosed with cancer. He was also joined by Shimina, who people might know from Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha and Oh My Venus. So actually, I did start it when it was first airing because I thought this is such an amazing drama. But I think I was actually really in the mood for something like a Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha. And it's really clear from episode 1, this is not Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha. So I remember I dropped it thinking, I know I've got to be in the right mood for it. So I picked it back up actually earlier this year when I was more ready for it. And I thought And I'd heard your episode as well because you sold it to the other noonas. And I remember you saying something about how emotional it was for you and how you cried during it. So I was thinking, right, I'd better, because I could, I could really enjoy this drama if I'm in the right place for it. So, but it was actually even better than I expected. And if anything, and I totally agree with you, I think this drama hadn't got the hype that it really deserves to have, because even despite its amazing cast, it kind of flew under the radar, as you said. And for me, it was much more emotional, has much more heart and depth than I expected. And the writing is just amazing. So as I said, you guys did a podcast, which was episode 87, called Saved by the Cell, where you tried to sell your fellow hosts a K-drama that you just started. And despite seemingly having sold this, because I think when you were talking about it, both Megan and Amy were like, oh, this sounds really interesting. They still haven't come to watch it. So for them and for others who are hesitating on starting, what message have you got to give them?
Look, I think there's things that we gravitate towards just by nature, right? And I don't think that when it comes to, especially my co-host Megan, which is funny because I feel like I align so much on Megan, except when I don't, which is all the time too. This is not a drama heavy on external conflict. This is an internal conflict, primarily internal conflict drama. That's not to say there's no, plot conflicts. Of course there are, but this is really about people. And I think that might give trepidation sometimes to her. I'm a little more surprised at Amy, but then I guess I often shouldn't be, because I feel as if this, I'm curious if they're going to listen to this and what they're going to think about me. They're not dead. If this was a story about Kim Woo-bin living as a boat captain and having kind of a desperate love for a noona haenyo, like diver, I think she would have been like, yes. But the fact that this was a like multi-part, kind of like episodic with all these vignettes, my hunch is that became more like a little bit more off-putting. Like there's just something that didn't feel as sexy to watch that, right?
Yeah.
And so when you talk about Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, like what's funny to me is that I think it is a good comparison. And I think a lot of people might have gone to Our Blues thinking this is going to be like another Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha. It's not. I like it better, but I don't think it's a huge, as I say, I like it better. I also don't feel like it's a great comparison because they're fundamentally different dramas. So if you want a core romance of like two characters and their growth and journey with like a supporting cast, that's going to be Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha. It is emotional. It does have layers to it, but I still feel like it hits a bit of like that fantasy space.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Much more grounded in reality. That's not to say it's like total reality, but like pretty much reality. And out of the gate, and we're going to talk about that first vignette, I almost bounced out after the first vignette. I came so close to it because I was like, it was too real and it hurt too much.
Yeah. I get where you're coming from. I think quite a few people actually on my Instagram, but we'll talk about that later, I think.
Yeah. So my sales pitch is, if you want to feel like this is a drama that by the end, it made me like, sometimes I just have dramas that make me want to be a better human and really reflect on what humanity means as a whole. Like the warts and all the struggles, and just that reminder that everyone's living a battle that we know nothing about. And I feel like that's what Our Blues was, is everyone has these internal struggles that like may not always be apparent. Sometimes they're very apparent. You can look at someone and be like, whoa, they are going through it. And sometimes you have no idea. The person who's joking and laughing could have a lot of pain or a lot of, loneliness. And so again, watching that made me remember that. And I think, again, like in doing that, I think that inspires me to be a better person, because when I see people out and about and I'm being my best self, lately I haven't. Lately, my son's been like, you are a mean driver, because I'm driving around like, you idiot, like to myself, like in the car. I need to remind myself, everyone is, waging a battle we know nothing about. Yeah. All right. So this is an episodic drama and it has a wide ensemble cast. Whose performances really stood out for you and who surprised you with their roles?
So I guess, like I said, the main stars are the ones, people come to see. And I was actually initially surprised at how willing, main leads who were used to carrying a whole big name drama themselves, so Kimball Bin, all the others, that they were so willing to be in this drama and share the limelight with such a big ensemble cast. And I think it was because of the reputation of the writer, No Hee-kyung, and it's directed by Kim Kyu-tae, who also helmed one of Leah's favorite dramas, Moon Lovers, Scarlet Heart Rio, which we've done a podcast on already. So in an interview, it was really interesting, I found. So No Hee-kyung said, I don't remember when exactly, but at some point, writing a story with two lead characters no longer interested me. We are the heroes of our own story, aren't we? I didn't want to treat some characters as less significant. I thought that was really interesting. And then and then she also said, on attracting such a big cast, she said, any writer would want to work with such actors. I'm grateful that they all agreed to take part in the project. My only concern was to give them the roles they had never played before so that they could show their unseen sides to their viewers. And I think she absolutely nailed that. I think so many of the actors were in roles we haven't seen in them before. And that was also one of the surprises to me. Like, it's always really nice when you go to a K-drama and you see some familiar faces, especially those people who play side characters, and then to see them in something really quite different was really refreshing. So actually for me, Shin Min-na, for example, is the least sunny, least comedic, most internal role I've seen her in. Han Ji-min was completely different from her character in One Spring Night, which is one of my top 10 dramas. But the standout for me was actually Lee Bung-hyun, so Mr. Sunshine. We will probably discuss his storyline and performance in more detail in the spoiler section, but like, just wow. Like, I really liked him in Mr. Sunshine, but for me, he's overshadowed by the rest of that incredible cast, and I really lost my heart to Gu Dong-nae in Mr. Sunshine. But like, just, oh my god, like in this drama, he is just so good. Like, gut wrenchingly tear my heart out, viscerally good. And his performance for me personally is worth it alone for this drama. And he absolutely deserves his Baeksang nomination for Best Actor this year. I totally congratulate him for winning that. He really deserves it. I'm really glad that they recognised his performance specifically, because he really nailed it. And he just left like nothing else, right? He just put everything on the table in that role by the end of that drama.
Yeah, I mean, truly, I just want to say yes. And in Mr. Sunshine, I think he did a great job. I mean, he was carrying like a lead role, but it's a more reserved, buttoned down character. He is great, but I do think that cast had a lot more. Yeah, I mean, like it had Gu Dong-nae. Your eye is going to be drawn to other parts of that drama. But in this, he snuck up on me. Like, when we start this drama, we see him at the beginning, you're like, okay, like, I mean, he's doing fine, but like, whatever. Like, he's not horribly unlikable. He's kind of just there and not very likable. But by the time the drama finishes, I mean, I would give him a kidney. I'd be like, do you have an organ failing? Because I got you. I loved his performance. And you have a question that you want to ask me, and I feel like I need to unpack my love in answering that question. So why don't we go there?
Okay, cool. Which question is that?
The next one about crying.
Oh, okay, right. So not gonna lie, right? This drama made me sob really badly all the way through. I was a total puddle at the end. And this makes the drama sound like a super sad drama, but it isn't. So I know you cried, but how was your crying scale, 1 to 10?
My crying scale was a 25. So I just finished Alchemy of Souls, which made a lot of people cry. I really liked Alchemy of Souls. I did not have a single tear leak down my cheek watching Alchemy of Souls. And there's emotional parts to it. I cried myself into a dehydrated raisin for like 50% of this drama. I just would have tears just leaking down my face. Is it sad? No. And yes. So this isn't like a drama that you're going to leave. This isn't a drama where it's just kind of like pondering the miseries of life, and you leave just being like FML. Like I said, you leave very much like, I think, with a renewed curiosity and love for like humans. At least I did. But it was in doing that, because as you go into everyone's internal stories, there's just a lot there. And I felt like a lot of it felt authentic. And even if I didn't have these characters' stories, I certainly have been like touched or affected by elements that come up for different characters. And so I think it hit me in like the empathy feels. And then also just, I love that the writer really was like, I am going to invest, because sometimes it's like a really good story is great plot, great characters. But sometimes we'll be like, okay, we're going to really focus on the plot, or we're really going to focus on the characters. And here, I think she really made a choice to focus on the characters. But since we have so many vignettes, each story doesn't really get stale. And so you just feel like you go on this like deep dive of the soul with each of the character vignettes. And they all affected me. Each story affected me greatly.
Yes. I thought she did a really great job of kind of just putting in like little clues here and there. So you, as much as it's episodic, you still get the other characters from the other stories make an appearance throughout the drama, and you kind of pick up hints and things about their past, or things that make you question like, why are they behaving like that, which the writer then picks up later in their story and develops. And so you're already quite invested by the time you come to their story. So was there one that really, like, did they all just rip your heart to pieces, or was there one that was like much worse?
I mean, they all did to different degrees, but Lee Byung-hun and his mom ruined me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to talk about it more until we get to the spoilers.
Yeah, I know. But I would just I hard agree. I don't do this very often with dramas, but for that section, there was one section, I think you probably know which one it is, I had to stop and like go get more tissue, calm myself down, because I was like, I'm not in like I can't carry this on until I kind of just get over like how much I am crying right now. And then like I watch in bed, similar to you, so I was also having to like keep it in a bed because like I had a sleeping person next to me, and I just remember thinking like I kind of need to go to another room just to kind of like just calm down a little bit before I press play and carry on, because it was just like
so much. And then another relationship that didn't make me sob quite as like painfully, but like I would just leak tears throughout it, was the dynamic between Lee Young-uk, who is played by Han Ji-min, and she has a sister who has Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And their relationship felt really special, and it felt like a sister relationship, and I have sisters. And so there were times where it just hit me, and like my sisterly feels, like the two of them, and like how they kind of are in each other's spaces and interacted with each other. And I felt like, I don't want to give too much away in the non-spoiler section, but I felt like there were certain things, like I don't know if it, like there were times where like maybe some parts of the characterization landed a little bit different. Like I didn't love every way it landed, I guess. But I would say for the most part, I did. I thought it was a really sensitive and nuanced depiction of someone who has a lot of dignity and a lot of pride and a lot of worth as a person, trying to have the world see them as such. And that just was getting me a lot throughout the drama.
Yeah. I think for me, it had echoes of It's Okay to Not Be Okay, because I thought that was another drama that did really well depicting the kind of, you've got two siblings, one who has effectively a disability and one who doesn't. And the one who doesn't carries a lot of responsibility that they didn't ask for, right? They didn't actually sign up for. But at the same time, they feel a lot of guilt at feeling that responsibility and wanting to escape that responsibility. And I think this drama did a really good job of fleshing that out in a way that didn't make you feel like that person was a bad person for just wanting to just be free of that for a while. So I think for me, the storyline that really ripped me, despite all the big stars and their storylines, actually was the story of the two dads. So again, I don't want to spoil the storyline because I think it's important to enjoy it cold, so to speak. But I just cried at so many points in the story. There are basically two single dads, one with a daughter, one with a son. And the relationships between them are all just K-drama gold, just so real to life. All the history we carry in our relationships with people we have known all our lives. And then also for both of them, they're single parents. And then for the children, they're the only child of that single parent. And then that duty and that burden, which, and by which I mean like an Asian Confucian concept, which actually something me and Grace are going to talk about and do a podcast on. But all of that they carry with them. And especially when you see your parents live a life to give a hard life, to give you a life that they couldn't dream of having themselves. They're doing it for you and you alone. And once they provided for you, there's some element of freedom for them on the horizon. I mean, I'm going to stop there, but everything about this storyline gutted me, and I was in pieces just throughout. And I actually thought it was so great that we got some screen time, such solid screen time from actors that generally play side characters and don't normally get such big, chunky, meaty roles. And so just shout out to the actors who played the dads, who's Choi Yoon-jun, who we know from Hospital Playlist and many, many other dramas, who played Hu-shik, and Park Ji-hwan, who played In-kwon. They were just amazing.
Absolutely.
So the other thing that I really loved was the OST. Like, this is such a good soundtrack. I immediately played it over and over. But there is a lead song, With You, performed by a certain person from BTS, Jimin, and his buddy Ha Sung-wan. So Leah, did you know that he did this before you came into the drama?
I did.
Of course you did.
Well, because this was his so I'm ARMY, part of the BTS fandom.
You shock us all. You shock us.
Some people might just be listening for the first time. And
Leah's ARMY, everyone. Leah's ARMY.
So, okay. So Jimin is one of my precious baby. Like, I love Park Jimin. And this was not only his first ever original soundtrack or OST, this was also his first ever official project outside of the group BTS. So at the time he came forward to do this, all the other BTS members had released individual work. And so this was like his first time. And he did a collab with his good friend who was in a now disbanded group called 101. And so that's Ha Sung-woon. And I love it. It's really, Jimin has a very soft, kind of like ethereal voice, and the little hook, so when you watch a drama and it has a good OST, like they roll out that OST like over and over and over. And sometimes I honestly will just play that song just to kind of like have like some of the feels that I had watching the drama. And I like that. And so his voice is just very soft, kind of almost like feather light. And I like it because it never like takes over the scenes, but it's kind of just like this little, like, it's pretty emotional. And then when you hear it, it just kind of like heightens. So I just wanted to throw a little nod out because I really love that song.
It's a great song. I think it matched well with the drama. Definitely. He had that, like you said, this kind of ethereal quality that I always think. And there was elements of that kind of feel in the drama, being set in Jeju and all that sunshine and the blue sky and the clouds.
All right. So Sarah, was this your first Kim Woo-bin?
Yes. And Amy, if you're listening, I get it. I now get it. Like, this man is like a god. He's actually almost too good looking, I thought, in a way, to be convincing slicing mackerel in a market, because like people who are as godlike as him just don't work in a random fish market slicing mackerel. But I did really love him in this role on his bus, writing existential questions to himself on the windows, and just, yes, he's just strolling around being like, just looking amazing. But Leah, this is your second Kim Woo-bin, right? You've seen him in Airs before. How was this role compared to how he played in Airs, which I've not seen?
So for me, he was the most interesting part of Airs, which is Kim Woon-suk drama about kind of like poor little rich kids. And he plays is like part of a love triangle that also it like puts him up against his former bestie, who is Lee Min-ho. But his character of Young-do in Heirs is just pure damage, has so many emotional boo-boos, and is just like a very problematic character who is also just kind of like a living nerve. Like it doesn't take much to just touch and that pain is like radiating out. So look, I knew that was a role. I knew that he was a good actor. I mean, he acted his butt off in what I thought was kind of an average drama, but he is stellar. But in this drama, he's very emotionally healthy. He's very grounded. He's very loving. And it was just kind of a nice thing to see him be, because like the last time I'd seen him, he was just a freaking hot mess. And I had some people say like, oh, I wish there was more of him. I wish there was more of his story. I honestly felt okay. I felt like the storyline he's a part of is an important I mean, they're all important storylines. But I thought I had enough of him and his character. Like it's maybe not like the most faceted character of all of them. I mean, he's got stuff to work with, but he's also just very good looking and very good.
Yes. Yes. He's a very good person.
And so
really solid.
Yeah. And sometimes that just took, I didn't want to be in emotional pain every single moment of every single episode. And there were times where he is in scenes that are heavy and that did make me feel certain ways. But there's times where he's just a hot dude driving his boat, or there's times where he's just like living in his bus, writing, you know, questions about the universe and his like relationship with a marker on a window. So I just appreciated when he came around, because it was just a time to have like just a little bit of visual eye candy and like a little bit of just kind of like what you would expect in like more of like, I'm not trying to dog hometown cha-cha-cha, but like, you know, like he was part of like what was like a very just like romantic arc.
Yes.
And so like sometimes you just want to move to the story that has like just like the drive-through romance that you can invest in, because like dealing with filial piety and children, you know, disobeying your expectations, or, you know, humongous depression. Like, you know, like sometimes I just want to be like, you're hot and like I hope you find out.
I know. I did find it really interesting that this, in a way, this was his comeback drama, right? That he chose this drama. I mean, I'm sure he got offered like other dramas, but that he chose specifically this drama. I find that quite fascinating, actually, because, like I said, he's not the main star in it. He doesn't even have like the biggest role of a set of roles in terms of an emotional arc or a character journey, etc. So,
but his fiance does, and I love that too. I love that they keep the drama together. And she's not one of the main leads either.
No.
She has a lot more to do though, emotionally.
Yeah, she does. Yeah. And she's playing so against type. So it's it's really interesting.
All right. Well, you know what? We normally don't do a K-pop rec of the week, you and I, but this time I'm just going to say the K-pop rec of the week is going to be with you. Let's throw that in as our K-pop rec of the week. So I'll throw that in the show notes so folks can listen to it. And then, all right, let's pivot. I think I'm hoping we've made a case. Oh, actually, no, we haven't, because what I really wanted to do was ensure that we defined what slice of life or quiet dramas are, because we've talked about this on the pod before, but you know, not everyone listens to every single thing. And it's always good to have a reminder. And so I think, again, if you're on the fence and you're trying to decide, is this for you or not? Look, give it a shot. Honestly, just stop being a judgy a-hole and like make the effort. But like, let's talk about slice of life or quiet dramas and why they can be, you know, really wonderful.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, like a slice of life drama is something that brings almost the mundane and everyday to life in a realistic way. So other genres, everything's a little bit hyper realistic. Like say a rom-com office romance, no one really works in a place like that. Like, you know, they often don't seem to do any thinking work at all. But in a slice of life one, there is a sense of drudgery, the day-to-day, the daily trudge through your commute, the monotony, but emotionally there's a lot going on. And I think you already touched on this, but like I always love the quote by Henry David Thoreau, the mass of men live lives of quiet desperation. And I think a great slice of life drama pulls back the curtain to the lives of normal members of society to reveal their lives of quiet desperation and what they're going through underneath. And I think that if that is something that appeals to you, that Our Blues just absolutely nails it.
So have you ever watched the movie Shadowlands about C.S. Lewis?
Yes, I have. And is it Deborah Winger? I feel like we need Amy.
Anyway, the reason I'm bringing it up is there is a quote in that that has always sat with me ever since I was like, I might have been like in high school when I first saw it, but it is, "We read to know we're not alone." And that's what so C.S. Lewis, from Narnia, like he's the main character. He says that at one point. And it's always stayed with me. And I feel like that's what watching slice of life dramas are to me too, is like, I watch to know I'm not alone. And so I think, again, that's where I just invite folks to be curious, settle in. This is not like crawling at a snail's pace either. Like, I don't feel like this is just like the slowest plots in the world.
No, absolutely not. No. Yeah, I have a love for slow dramas. I was trying to get you to watch The Interest of Love, which is maybe the slowest drama I've ever watched. And I know that other people, especially on the Patreon, were watching it and finding it frustrating. But this is not that. It actually moves on at quite a pace. They've got a lot of characters to cover, a lot of stories, and a lot of vignettes.
Yeah.
So, Leah, I also wanted to just double check with you, like, what trigger warnings would you give listeners that they should be aware of before starting this drama?
Yeah, so I think that is good because this drama deals with a lot of heavy things. And this also means that if you brush up against a trigger that you would tend to not want to engage with, you also could flip to another story because, not every story, these are not coming up in every story. But I do want to say that there should be trigger warnings for suicidal ideation. I think first and foremost, like that definitely comes up. I would say that there is a lot of like that's my biggest thing is suicidal ideation, and then kind of like that heavy depression and like depression that's not romanticized. Like what? Yes. And I'm not depressive. I don't have depression, and I've never suffered from depression, but I have known very close loved ones who've been very affected by depression. And I feel like this was a very accurate depiction of what depression could look like. Yeah. And how it can like touch on suicidal ideation. So I guess I really just wanted to like put that out there that like there is one plot that does touch on that. Is there anything else that you can think of that you would say?
Not for trigger warnings.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move over to the spoiler section. So, okay. This drama is rife with social grapplings. And I thought we could talk about, 3, not in a huge amount of depth, but I do think that they were interesting because, we're both approaching this with more of a Western lens. And I kind of wanted to just discuss like how we thought these plot points were integrated into the overall story.
So this is such an interesting question, Leah. I'm so glad you asked it because actually I'm going to contradict you slightly because I actually watched this a lot with, I watched it a lot with my Asian lens. So I'm British Chinese for those of you who don't know. And I actually really want to compare how I felt with how you felt and see how we came to it. Because for me, for example, teen pregnancy in Asia is a huge no, right? Just huge. Like it's so many things. It's the disappointment that you've interrupted that ideal path of top student to SNU to big job, having a child outside of marriage. It's a huge shame on your family. It's a huge shame on your parents for failing to raise you properly, as well as, the weight of patriarchy, which for us is expressed through Confucianism and a girl being a slut and with sleeping with men at an early age and all of that shaming. So it's just there's a lot. And for me, that added a lot of the pathos to this storyline. And I talked about how it really made me cry. And a huge part of that was that it was just like the shame the parents felt, the shame the children felt, and just how they all felt like they failed each other. So like, did you feel that yourself of the weight of that as a Western viewer?
You know, what's interesting is yes and no, but I think being a Western, like white viewer living in America, and we talked about this a little before, like we started with the pod. Yes, but let me like thread some needles and then like come back to answering your question. And so I felt like this really, the pregnancy was like part of the core story, but there was also the ability to reproductive freedom and deciding whether or not to access an abortion. So we have two characters, teen, kind of like Romeo and Juliet lovers. You know, their parents were good friends who become arch enemies and have like all their hopes in these two very high achieving children who have fallen in love. And, you know, the guy, just like a typical dude, must have found a crusty, dusty condom, and like obviously it didn't work. I love when she was like, "Where did you get it? You know, this has been in your pocket like 1,000 years. Like, why is this happening?" But you know, then they have to explore, like, because the first thing is like, maybe don't keep the baby, like have an abortion. And so first I just wanted to say that, you know, this drama coming out in 2022 does base itself in the reality that in 2019, South Korean courts did decriminalize abortion care. And so, the removal of abortion care has been like taken off of the South Korea criminal code. And so this drama is kind of coming into that reality of like, you know, there is access to abortion, but just because there was decriminalization doesn't mean that there was easy access. And, you know, so we see a pretty real depiction. And so for me, you know, I'm not Asian and I didn't grow up in an Asian family, but I grew up in a very pro-life Catholic family. And I grew up with friends who did get pregnant as teenagers, like in high school unintentionally, and what that looked like to try to make those choices at a really young age. And being a young person myself who was like, parents didn't know. So we're trying to grapple and figure this out ourselves when we're like 16, 17, you know what I mean? And so I think that's where I was hitting it, was like remembering what it was like to be trying to be forced with, you know, being a supportive friend to people going through things like this at a time. And then also, I think what layered onto it to me was the fact that the drama even went here with the idea that she ended up not ending the pregnancy at an early stage. It ended up being ended, or it didn't end up being ended, but she was considering ending it much later in the term. Yeah. Being in the US right now, where we are just throwing up roadblock after roadblock to reproductive freedom, the fact that they were going to try to make a sympathetic case to somebody being pregnant and seeking an abortion, seeking what would ultimately in this country be framed as a late term abortion. Yeah. I think that's where I was just like finding it interesting to see, like they were presenting that as a no judgment decision in a way that felt authentic and not like prostitute. I was just like, I was like, I can't even imagine a show being on like network television in the US where there's a teenager who gets pregnant, originally wants to end it. There's a couple, like, you know, fear and all sorts of uncertainty and just kind of like not, you know, whatever delays it. So you kind of go into like deep denial. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're like, you know, 20 some weeks pregnant and you're like, I can't do this. I shouldn't do this. And they literally get up to the line of like looking to end their pregnancy. I think people would lose their fucking minds. Wow. Lose their minds. I don't even think the drama would get talked about anymore. All it would be talked about is like the late term abortion drama. I feel like it would overshadow the rest of the entire
the whole thing. Yeah. That's, I mean, for me, like as a Brit, that's just so fascinating because for us, like abortion is just not a big deal. It isn't divisive. It isn't questioned. I mean, obviously there'll be pockets of people who maybe protest outside the odd abortion clinic, but generally speaking, it is nowhere near the divisive issue it is for you guys in the States. So we wouldn't have that in a drama either, but we wouldn't have it because it wouldn't even be like that big a deal anymore. Like that might have been a drama storyline like back in the 80s or something, but like certainly not now.
I think I had it with that. And then to bring it back, when the decision is ultimately made, I'm going to keep the baby, kind of like the Papa Don't Preach. Basically, like I got to go back to my dad and be like, I'm in trouble deep, but I'm keeping my baby. So basically, that's where we go. I had mixed feelings, honestly, because like I understood how the young couple arrived at the decision. I also felt like it was very idealized, like what the plan would be. Like,
very, yeah. Like she's gonna study while she has a baby, and I'm like,
he's gonna like he's
okay.
gonna do the SNU path or whatever, have the baby.
Yeah.
He's gonna give up his career path, and then once the baby's like 4 or whatever, like she'll be done with school, and then they'll pivot to him being his turn. And he was like, "Yes, we can do this." And I was like, "This is really sweet." And this is the least realistic part of the entire.
It's so true. I did think that too. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where as a Western viewer, for me, that's where like I started to just get into like that. But yeah, I mean, beyond that though, I think I didn't have like the Asian lens of like the weight of my family. I had if I had gotten pregnant in high school and gone to my parents, I would have been like, you are like, I grew up in a house that has like, my parents have shifted their politics over time, but at that time, it would have been like, you are having this baby situation. And so that's a very different lens too, because there wouldn't have been this, like their parents were like, do not have this baby. Like this is not the decision we want you to have. I would have been in a very different position.
Yeah. No, it brought it up for me as well. Like imagine telling my mum that I was pregnant at like that age. Oh God, like I just, it was all just a bit too like too real of just how bad it would have been.
And also I think just how innocently dumb they were in getting pregnant. Like you said, like the crusty old condom, like so I don't know. I loved them though. I thought they portrayed everything so well. And there was part of me that was like, you know what, I'm just going to put my drama brain on and they are going to work this all out. They are going to be that success story. And she is like, they're going to do it because I don't know what else to say here.
I mean, the thing is for me, like the niggle that I had with that storyline was that, it was a bit idealized, but also like I felt like the whole drama was talking about the strength of community, right? And actually just saying that it takes more than, because of anything, and this is a journey that I'm going through with my own family and my own family and my own family within the community that we're living in, which is a very Western community, but like we've just become so divorced from community, like this whole like it takes a village to raise a child type of thing. It's just not kind of a reality that most Western societies have anymore. But that this drama kind of really said, actually, do you know what? Like I think we've lost something here, because here is a community that all grew up together and are all supporting together. And so if the drama had said, right, we're going to give up our, dream of SNU because we're a little bit too far and we actually need this community to help us raise our child together, I think that would have been a bit more realistic and a bit more fitting with, the story that the drama was trying to tell us about the strength of community and how we need community to raise families. That was just my niggle.
I think that is a great take, and I think that would have been a better than like that, like go at it alone, we're gonna like go to the city. I mean, like the dads eventually became like, you knew they'd be like involved, but I think the way you just sold it, that would have been the better choice. Well, we should send a memo, be like, do an addendum to the drama. That would have
by the way
made a lot more sense to thematically rather than like the go at it alone mentality.
Yeah. Right. So similarly for depression, like I think firstly for me, I think that you probably live in a society that I consider, even for Western standards, to be the most aware and accepting of mental health, like in America. Like to me, it feels like having a therapist is, as I understand, quite a normal thing. Like for me as a Brit, it's not yet a very normal thing, but in Asia, it's definitely less normal. So I can only really speak to like my own family, but like in my parents' generation, there is an awareness of mental health and of depression, but it's really like at the fringes, no real deep understanding of it. And I would probably, being a little bit generalization and being a bit judgmental, there's probably still a lot of like, just pull your socks up and get over it type of feeling with depression. So for me, what I really loved about this drama and its portrayal, I mean, there's lots of things which I think you're going to talk about, but I really loved that Dong-suk, he really tried, he wasn't judgmental, he really tried to understand, he acknowledged his ignorance, and he wanted to understand her better. What did you think?
Yeah, so I will first accept what you were saying, but I will also say that, America is, I mean, we're almost at 500 million people now, right? Like, this is a big ass country. So there's pockets that are going to be very accepting and pockets that are not. And I am in a pocket, which is coastal California, where, like, I mean, if I told people my dog had a therapist, I don't think I would look that funny. If I was like,
does your dog have a therapist, Leah?
My dog needs a therapist. But I have had conversations just to like give you where, I've had people tell me that they could recommend someone who could do remote pet Reiki on my dog.
Oh, God, I remember you talking about this.
Which sounds like seriously the best job ever, which is what I want to be doing, is watching dramas, hashtag remote pet Reiki. But yeah. And so, I mean, yes, therapy for me is very, very normalized. I also work in student affairs at a university on the coast in California, in probably one of the most progressive towns in one of the most progressive states in our country. So with that as a context, yeah, I have I truly forget that therapy is not as normalized and that mental health isn't as normalized until I go back to my hometown sometimes and I'm like, oh. And so I'd say it's better, but I would say that, growing up, I had a lot, I come from a very big family, like a very big extended family. And so things like aunts who experienced postpartum depression, which I now can name and understand being postpartum depression.
Yeah.
Was seen as like, have you gotten a load of so-and-so acting da da da, you know what I mean? Like very much like that. And I grew up with undiagnosed ADHD and obsessive compulsive disorder that was very much like, just stop doing your stuff. Like, just don't be like that.
Concentrate, focus.
Concentrate, focus, don't have rituals, don't do your like whatever, you know what I mean? And so I took that shit underground. And that's not to be like a knock on my, this isn't like me coming to like knock on like my family and their reactions to things. But it's also just like, I try to normalize that. I remember when I wrote my first book, I put a character in it who has OCD, and I it's a light touch to the book, but I put in the notes that part of the reason that it inspired me to write the book was because I had lived experience. And that felt at that point, which was like 2014, like a big thing for me to put out there. Like, I had never really openly talked about it with friends and family. I hadn't really like come out, I guess, as like, somebody living with any type of mental illness. And so, and even still, sometimes what's so funny is I'll be accepting of so many other people. And then for me, I'll like try to like minimize it all the time. And so, yes, I guess seeing this person go through that, again, I haven't gone through postpartum depression, but I felt like, some of her stuff was rooted in that, but it was much deeper than that. Like, she had like clinical, like massive depression. And I think that this was a good non-judgmental way that the show took, like, her husband not fully understanding, kind of being like, just get it fucking together. I also thought they made a good choice that she was like affluent, that she had a beautiful son, that she herself was beautiful, that she had a hot zaddy husband. Like, everything was good for her.
Yeah.
And yet she had horrible depression. And I thought that was a really good choice, because that is real. It's not like, I mean, like, if they had made her like struggling to like live on bootstraps and stuff, I think it would have been like, okay, we can dismiss this a little more easily, or I can like distance myself from that experience. But given he seemingly had it all, and we see this even now when we see, celebrities who end their own lives, or people who seem to have it all, quote unquote, and are struggling with this. And so I think that kind of normalized to me the fact that, like, this is a disease, and you don't necessarily have control if it's going to come for you or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with all of that. I thought they did similarly. I think they did a great job of showing, like, how it was very clear how much she loved her son,
Mhm.
But despite that, it wasn't like, there's always the feeling of like, well, if this is important enough for you, you would just get over it, right? You would just get over it. Like you could just, like I said, pull your socks up
Yeah.
and woman up or man up. And I think they did a really good job of showing that you can feel a great love for the people in your life, but just still, it's not enough. It's not like you, like I think her husband at some point says, like, what basically, like, what more do you need to motivate yourself to get your shit together, you know? And I think they showed a really good they really did a good depiction of why it isn't about the motivation to get up and get your shit together. Like that is not actually how it works.
But I also felt like even that was relatable to me because he's not a villain. Like he may
No.
not always be the most sympathetic, but I feel like this is a man at his wit's end who's like,
Yeah.
He's doing what he sees as the good. Like he is working a big job. He's providing. He is a loving dad.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like he did love his wife, or he loved his wife in a non-depressive state. And seeing those times of frustration of just like, what more? You know what I mean? And she doesn't have an answer. And he being frustrated, just again, it felt very real. And sometimes with slice of life, what I like is that we're not being told how we should feel or how we should be judging. We're kind of invited to be like, look at this dynamic and like, what would you do? Or, what do you think about this? Like the drama's not telling us like this or that. It's just like, here's the situation. Like you can describe like how you are going to like relate to it.
Yeah. And actually, even their relationship was not like, it was true slice of life, right? But it wasn't like, here's your white knight on a horse charging in to save you and stop you from being depressed, right?
No,
It
thank
just
God.
wasn't, that was not the thread of their romance at all. And I really loved it for that too.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, he was a mess.
Yeah.
A total mess. But okay, before we pivot to that, I do think that like one thing that really struck me about this drama, and you did like a little bit of a deep dive in it, so I would like to like give you the floor to talk about it a bit, is that it talked about haenyos, like the and that part of Jeju society. And I found this to be a really lovely part of the drama. And so do you just want to talk a little bit about like these remarkable women and their culture?
Yeah, I mean, I found this really fascinating. I mean, actually, Grace and I have talked about wanting to do a deeper dive podcast on this. But basically, I've taken this from the New Yorker, which is what I was like looking at some research. But effectively, for hundreds of years, women in the South Korean island of Jeju have made their living harvesting seafood by hand from the ocean floor. And they don't use any breathing equipment. So their typical dive might last around 2 minutes and take them as deep as 10 meters underwater. So they wear like old-fashioned headlight-shaped scuba masks, and they dive with lead weights strapped around their waist to help them sink faster. And they have a round flotation device around about the size of a basketball, and it sits at the surface of the water with a net hanging beneath it to collect a harvest. And then they use a sharp tool to dig out either conch or abalone or other creatures from the crevices on the sea floor. And they had an exhibition actually in America recently where there was a photographer who took photos of the haenyo, and you can kind of look this up because the photos are really amazing. And the photographer himself, who's Korean, said they embody incredible mental and physical stamina, as the work itself is so dangerous. Every day they cross the fine line between life and death. I wanted to capture this extreme duality of the women, their utmost strength combined with human fragility. And I thought it was just really beautifully phrased, which is why I quoted it. And I think the drama did such an amazing job of showing that they're in some ways this was their everyday life, but within their everyday life they were, as he says, on that fine line between life and death all the time. And there was just so much strength in these. I mean, these women, I think he said some of the, like the oldest one was 80 something. And it is seen as a dying profession. I think the youngest, it was 38 at the time when they did just photos. And this is kind of seen as like the last generation of these haenyos. So yeah, really incredible. And there's also, I just wanted to flag, there is a very well regarded novel called The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C, which I've not personally read. Have you read it?
I don't, but I have it on my Kindle. So it is on
yeah.
my queue, but it's been there for almost a year. So I do have a lot of books that I'm looking to get to, but that is definitely one.
Yeah, me too.
So, okay, in the interest of time, I don't think we can go through every single vignette and talk about it. But I do think that, when we drop this episode, we can probably do a little bit on social media, talking about some of the relationships and asking people to weigh in on their favorites too. But why don't we each take like one vignette of characters and talk about why they're special to us?
Yeah. So, sorry. Assuming you're going to take Dong-suk and his mum. Yeah.
You know what? You can.
Because I have not written about, because you freestyle and talk about them, because I'm talking about Uni and
Okay.
her best friend. So that's what I'm going to go for. So overall, I really liked Uni's character the most. I liked especially that she was played by Lee Jung-eun, who's very often playing a mother character. So she was, like, for example, the cameo of in Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, she's Shimina's mum. But here she's in jeans, looking way younger than her usual character, and she's just living her and loving her single life. And I think it was a point made to me recently. I had a Patreon meet in Washington, D.C., and we were chatting, and one of my dinner companions said that she really identified with Uni as someone who herself, she's like unmarried, childless, and she really enjoyed seeing her living her best life, sitting in comfy clothes, drinking beer, watching K-dramas. And I really like that too, because actually it's not a character we actually see, like somebody, who's in middle age and kind of doing that. But I actually really specifically loved her storyline with her childhood best friend, Miran, who's played by Jung-hwa, who I've not seen before, but is currently starring in a new airing drama on Netflix, which is Dr. Cha. But I realized in watching this drama how few dramas I've seen really deal with the complexities of female friendships. And I think female friendships are difficult and different from male friendships. And I think, like, for example, we get a lot of K-drama besties, right? They're really great friends. Like, there are some notable exceptions to this, but generally we don't usually see the underlying difficulties in their relationship. We don't see often long-held grievances come to fore and explode. And I just really loved seeing the guilt that Uni felt at feeling this way, like this, feeling jealous, feeling like aggrieved towards Miran, and how jealous she was of the attention she got. And I just really loved how this storyline really played out, because it really kind of shook who she was to her core. But then at the end, like towards the end, we see Ingwan tell her, like in his usual offhand way, that Miran is like a butterfly and she's fluttering around, but she'll go again. But Uni is like a pillar of her community, and they all need her, and without her they'd all collapse. And she was kind of really poleaxed by that, because I didn't think she had realized it. And I really loved that scene, and I just really loved how fresh that storyline was. What about you?
So the relationship I want to talk about is with Miss Kong and her son Dong-suk. And this relationship's kind of hinted, like, explored throughout the drama, but we really kind of like get it fleshed out in 1819. And really, I think it's about, forgiveness, and how it's the hardest to give to someone who's hurt you a lot. And so I think I want to talk about this first, and just like, I don't want to like, and this is what I'm saying, like, this is why these dramas like get me, is because they feel very relatable. And so I'm not going to get into like my external family's like dramas and ins and outs, but I do want to touch on something that happened recently where I had a relative who passed away, and their relationship with their children was very difficult. And there was a lot of judgment against the children because they had very complicated feelings for their father.
Mm.
And I had a lot of sympathy with both sides, but really with the children, because children were children. And, I'd like to think adults are adults, even though people come with their own pain and baggage. But it was the idea of people being like, you should do X, Y, and Z because your parent is dying. Like, you should be doing this. You should be doing that. How can they not be doing that? I don't understand how this can be happening. And I feel like that's kind of what the nuts and bolts of this was. And what we see is Miss Kong in the story, she like works at the fish market and she is adorable, right? Like this is a lovely, sweet lady that we just see being lovely and sweet. So we're like, how is the son such a fucking toad to her? Like this is a good woman.
Yeah.
And he's like a bratty little whatever. However, there's a lot, like he feels like no one has really ever understood his side of the story, and he is very frustrated. And he has a lot of pain about what happened to him in like his childhood and his life, where, you know, his mom basically, you know, now she's old. And this happens to me too sometimes when I see like, I'm really taking this a little too far, but you know, when you see people who are being charged for war crimes and they're very old, and like the thing I see is somebody who's very old, looking very sick. You don't see the person at the time who was making bad choices. Not to say Miss Kong was like a Nazi collaborator, but you know, she now looks so old and frail. She's coughing up blood on the regular. You're just like, you know, whatever. So it's very easy to be like, she's the sad woman who wants closure with her son. And her son just needs to fucking get over it and like make up with his mom.
Yeah.
What the problem is that at one point his mom made a decision to basically not treat him like a mom.
Yes.
And the damage that caused him, I think, really justifies where he's showing up. And so and that's what got me with his character, is when he's finally like, no one is understanding me. And he has this moment where like her dying wish is to like go, you know, to the top of this mountain and, you know, have this moment. And everyone has opinions on how he should be with his mom. And in his romantic relationship with Shin Min-ah's character, she basically gives him permission, like, you can choose your relationship. I'm not going to judge you. Like whatever is going to feel like is going to give you closure is going to be like what I support you to do. And she's the only one really who like gives him permission, which felt really healing and which felt really powerful to do, because old wounds really hurt a lot. And when she basically, his mom, like the TLDR, because I haven't really gotten into like what his buried pain is the TLDR is that when his mom remarried, she didn't protect him. So in a family that bullied on him, she distanced himself for a host of self-protecting reasons and left him very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I know that the storyline means a lot to you too. So do you have anything that you want to add into this? Because, you know, I feel like this was just like the story that closed everything out and got us all. So I just want you to be able to feel like you can talk about it too.
Yeah. I think it was a really good, it was interwoven through the drama so well. We had so many scenes in the drama where you felt like she was trying to reach out to him and kind of build a little bit of a relationship. And he was often just kind of like snarling back at her and going like, what, now you care? Like, now you're going to pretend that you care? And like you said at the beginning, you're just like, why is he being so awful to this really lovely, fluffy old woman? And then I remember when you get to that backstory bit where they actually show her completely, properly walloping him as a young boy, right? And I just remember the shock that came, and she not just walloped him once, like she walloped him multiple times, and then she gave him like a really horrific kind of verbal dressing down, and then you're like, okay, right, okay, now I've got to like kind of reframe and reset like what I thought that this story was going to be.
I have a question for you too, just coming from like how you said, you know, like you watched a lot of this drama with like the Asian lens, especially for like the filial piety part.
Yes.
What do you do when you have this, you know, expectation from society to say like you have filial duties here to like your dying parent? However, your parent, when she remarried and became like the mother of her new husband's two sons, essentially told him that she was no longer his mother, but his aunt. So what happens when like as a child you almost have that drama or that trauma, and now as an adult you're being like, but now is the time to like do your duty? Like how did that land for you?
I think for me, I think that they did it really well. Like you said, just basically everybody was judging him, right? In the same way that society would judge him. Like, why are you not doing this for your mom? Why are you being so awful to her? Why are you so disrespectful? Like, it's so disrespectful. I think there's an element of like, it doesn't really matter what choices that your parents made. They made it for the goodness of you. There is an assumption that, in that filial piety, that you respect them, but their duty is also to look after you. And I think that's kind of that's what's broken. She did not look after him, but nobody in society knew that. Like, everybody just only sees him disrespecting her, and that was like the internal pain of it. And I think also that's why, there's that scene when she goes back to like the oldest son's apartment where he's having the memorial service with this dad, and she finally just confronts him, and like, she's so frail, right? She's almost coughing up blood, but she's like so angry, and you can see in Lee Byung-hun's eyes just like, oh my God, like, this is so, I was crying so much at the scene, because he was just like, this is the first time my mum has stood up for me in this family. This is the first time she's spoken up for me. And she was doing it so fiercely and so emotionally. And he was just really like, I mean, I can't imagine how that must have felt for him, because it was just really visceral. Like, finally, like, after all these years of pain, this woman is finally on my side. And sticking up for me in the way that she should have been, had, were she respecting this filial piety relationship, which goes two ways. It's not just one. And I think that's partly why I was like such a mess by the end of this drama, because it was just ripping everything like that and then kind of pushing it back together again, but almost too late. Right. That was the sadness of it.
Yeah. And then they go, yeah. And I mean, the sense of it being too late, like, this doesn't get tied up in a neat bow. Like, she wants to go back and see her hometown. It's a reservoir,
which doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. And even after she stands up for him, he has a time where he's like, look at you being nice to this dog. You're nicer to this dog than you've ever been to me.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's still pain, but I feel like it was just, I sympathize with both of them, though, because I still don't think she was presented to be a monster. She really was. No. She made horrible choices, but she was trying to like survive as a woman in a patriarchal culture that was not going to treat her and her son well unless she was able to attach herself to the protection and power of a man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, she wasn't presented as despite the, like, walloping like her son thing. It was very much like, I am trying my best here. Like, I am doing what I can to keep us alive and surviving. And you just need to respect that. I've told you this is the way it's going to be, and you need to just play your role, because I'm suffering too, and I'm having to do things that I'm basically a servant and a slave to this man. So you just don't make it more difficult for me. Yeah. Oh,
I want to cry right now.
But that end scene, which we can now talk about, we're in the spoiler section, but that end scene when he realizes he's come back, she's cooked him this meal. Like, there's this meal that he avoids eating, right? Everybody says, hey, it's doenjangjjigae. So he's like, you love doenjangjjigae, and he's like, I hate it, like, all the way through the drama. And then you realize it's because it's the one meal that she used to cook for him that he really loves eating, and she finally cooks it for him. And food, obviously, like in Asian culture, like, this is how parents show their love, right? For food, we're going to feed you. So anyway, so she finally created this doenjangjjigae for him. He finally was going to get to eat it, and he came back and she's died, and he hasn't been able to, like, their arc had just kind of come, and you kind of were feeling like, I hope they at least get some time together where they can really be themselves and be honest with each other. And then, oh God, he just falls to pieces, like, over her body. And it just, like, that scene was just like, oh my God.
Here's the thing that is magical in the drama is that I didn't leave that wanting to yeet myself into the river, like, because at the end he does healing work
he does. Yeah.
And that was such a smart and not easy choice, and that could have gone very bad.
It could have got what's the word, like, a bit like Hallmarky, right? A little bit too, like, sickly sweet. if they had wanted to. Like, I think they trod the line really, really well.
Yeah, I felt like we got enough that we got them both understanding each other, but they never got a closure with a bow. But then
Yes.
we see that he has gotten enough closure that he has like internally started to heal some of those wounds. And I believe that he's moving into a happier place.
Yeah.
Because he has also a partner who has been hurt and knows what it's like to feel pain in a way that others judge.
Yeah.
And so allows him to be like, you can have this pain and damage without me trying to say like, oh, you failed as a son, or oh, you should be doing X, Y, or Z. So they both basically could find each other's happiness in the end. And I felt like it felt like a real relationship potential because they both could be authentic, whole people with their whole goodness and their whole flaws.
Yes.
And they saw both of that with each other. And that's why I felt like their relationship could feel really successful. And that's a much heavier relationship than we got with Kim Woo Bin being hot in a van. Like the other big relationship, the other big love story. But I needed that too. I needed some of like that. Not that that story was without heaviness.
Yeah.
But I needed some of that rather than like the story of two very broken, damaged people
Finding each other
and healing.
Yeah. Have you got time for this last question?
Yeah, let's do this last question.
So I thought the writing for this drama was just sublime. As a writer, what do you most admire about what the writers did with this drama?
Well, first, I think they made a smart choice by having there be vignettes, because I felt like what it did was it let every story be somewhat tight. Because if you had a whole drama that was just unpacking one of these stories, I feel like it would have either gotten too slow or we would have had to throw in like a bunch of random sloppy middle stuff. Like, because the one thing that can happen, you know, that we know in like a 16 episode traditional K-drama is it's very easy sometimes that we get to like a sloppy, not a sloppy, that's, I don't like that word, just a saggy middle where, you know, we've kind of got started off really strong and the writers clearly know kind of where they want to take it at the end. But, you know, and this happens to so many people. I mean, this happens to me every time I freaking write a book. You get to the middle and you're like, oh my God, I'm not like there. But you like keep this energy going.
Yeah.
In doing the vignette model, you could take all these stories, make them like hone down to their essence and what would carry an entire drama as itself when you make it part of this unified whole of the story of like a small community of friends, then becomes really rich and layered. And they do all tie into each other, but it's about regret. It's about hope. It's about love. It's about loss. And all these stories have threads of that. And we see them intersectioning in each other's lives, but not to where like the arcs aren't really getting too muddled up unless you've got like the story of like the teen parents and like the dads. Their stories, you know, even though we see them from two different kind of POVs, like I feel like we get the kids and their like love story, and then we get the dads. Those are very intermeshed stories, but even just switching the POVs to see the experiences from like one hand to the other, it lets you, it keeps the stories fresh and it keeps, I think, the intensity going well, and it lets it be a slice of life internally, with a heavy focus on the internal conflicts of everything without ever feeling like it kind of starts to just like run out of steam.
Yeah. Or get too heavy.
Yeah. And it really made me be like, maybe I want to write more vignettes. Like, honestly, like when I think about it, it makes me think like, this is how I would really like to structure a novel, because I tend to, you know, people will be like, what do you come up with first, plot or characters? And I think, you know, everyone does some, like you're not always doing one or the other, but I tend to come at things from characters, and I tend to get like a character in my head and then start to like explore what that character would want to do. And that also means that I can have a lot of drama or books that just don't end up going anywhere because like they didn't have to do. And I would end up giving up writing it. But in this case, I was like, oh, this is such a good framework of doing it like this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I thought that it was so expertly put together. Like, I think it was very clear the story they were trying to tell throughout. So I'm really going to check out her other dramas, this writer. She's It's Okay, That's Love. Have you watched that? Is that one of the ones that you watched? No. And Dear Friends. So I've heard like good things about both those dramas, so I definitely want to go and check out her other dramas too.
Yeah, I'm so happy that we got to talk about this. I feel like it niggled me that I hadn't potted on it, because I feel like it's such an important, amazing drama. So I'm just very glad to get to have that be in our backlist, because it made me proud to watch dramas, honestly. I was like, this is top quality drama.
It is. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm really, really glad, because you sold it to me in that episode as well. I mean, it was one of those things, was like, wow, this cast, I've got to watch it. But then I think the way you told me about the story was really like, oh, that's really interesting, actually. So, yeah, I mean, definitely be in the right mood for it, because when you're in the right mood for it, it will click with you. And if you're also one of these people that finds like crying kind of cathartic, if there's a lot of stuff going on in your life at the time, this is also good for that, I think, because I felt like the crying was not like, oh my God, I'm so sad. It was, a lot of it was like, oh my God, this has really touched me emotionally and is letting me have this cathartic cry about someone else's life.
And I felt like, yeah, and you may end up being like me, where you're like, I just see all these intersections to like points in my own life, and like,
absolutely,
have that like cathartic connection to those too. So I haven't cried much in dramas lately. Have you been crying a lot?
Well, I cried a lot for this is probably the drama that I cried most this year. But I also cried in Call It Love, which everyone in the Patreon is really loving, and I've been trying to sell you. I think I've sold you, right? I don't think I'm going to sell Megan. I don't know if I'm going to even try. So I need to go and work out my pitch to Amy so that you guys can watch it and cover it for the pod, because it's amazing.
Here's my question. This is a hard question for you, I think.
Okay.
So if in the next like 6 weeks I was to watch a drama that you recommended, would you say Call It Love or The Red Sleeve?
Oh, Leah. Well, the thing is, though, I am, and I think I've said this before, I am not like everybody else that love The Red Sleeve. I am in the very small minority that did not love The Red Sleeve. So in some ways, it's not that difficult to answer this question, because I'd be like, Call It Love. But I just really want to hear what you think about The Red Sleeve, because I think you will love it. And I think you'll love it so much. And I think that it's a podcast that everybody needs to hear. But yeah, so personally for me, Call It Love. For the greater good and the podcast, The Red Sleeve.
Okay. All right. That was a good sales pitch. So I will do both. But yeah, always a pleasure. And thanks so much for taking the time to unpack this one. I think I appreciated getting to talk about it with you and the perspectives that you brought to it. And honestly, I know Kim Ubin's next drama looks very external conflict focused.
It's a Megan Kim Ubin drama, right?
I mean, like, I couldn't have put together a more Megan drama, but I'm excited to see him in it.
Yeah, no, me too. Yeah, he'll be great. He will be great.
So I'm really glad that he's booked and busy.
Yes. And I haven't seen Alienoid, which was like his other, like his film kind of like comeback, which is meant to be like a crazy movie, but it's got Kim Tae-ri in, which I know you're a big fan of too.
Yeah, I need to probably watch that. God, there's not enough time sometimes.
There's not enough time. But yes, thank you for having me. I've really, really enjoyed our chat, and it was really lovely to revisit this drama, which I loved so much.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your week, and we will, regroup once I've watched some more dramas that you are telling me to watch.
Yay.
Okay. Annyeong.
Annyeong.
Kamsahamnida. Thank you for listening to Afternoona Delight. Where can you find us outside the pod? Head on over to afternoonadelight.com. That's AFTERNOONADELIGHT.com. You'll find links to all our social media, our book recs, K-pop and K-skincare recs, and if you want even more Afternoona Delight, because really who doesn't, you can join our Patreon, where you can choose the patron level that's right for you. Join in daily K-drama conversations, listen to bonus podcast episodes just for patrons, and participate in our monthly live K-drama support group via Zoom. We can't wait for you to be a part of the community. Until next time, annyeong!